Welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies and the characters that make us feel seen. Today, I'm joined by an actor who will be very familiar to anyone who follows the Flanaverse. That's the shows and movies of Mike Flanagan, from movies like Hush and Oculus to shows like The Haunting of Hill House and The Fall of the House of Usher. Now, writer, director, editor Mike Flanagan has a new movie out called The Life of Chuck. And wouldn't you know it, my co-host today is in that one too. Recently, she appeared in a powerful role in the medical drama The Pit, the show of the year. And you might also recognize her from Grey's Anatomy. Her name is, yes, drum roll, Samantha Sloyan, and she is truly one of my favorite actors. How appropriate then that Samantha joins us to talk about Feeling Seen by Special Agent Dale Cooper in David Lynch's masterful television show, Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks started in 1990 and ran for 2 seasons, followed by a movie, Fire Walk With Me. A 3rd season aired on Showtime decades later, Twin Peaks: The Return, and Lynch passed away, but he left us with a stunning filmography of mysterious, beautiful, and weird stories. So let's get into it. I am so happy that one of my favorite actors is on the show. So my standard question is, what else do the folks need to know about you, Samantha, before we get started?
Oh, well, I mean, thank you so much for that introduction. That really felt great.
Oh, good. Great.
The business end is, Life of Chuck is going to be coming out, and I would love for everybody to go see that. And then other than that, I'm just really excited to be here and have this conversation and talk about stuff we love and, why we love it. So, yeah. When I first got your invitation to come on, I read about it, and it really kind of, at first I was like, I don't know. I don't know, what makes me feel seen? And then it took me down this really interesting rabbit hole where I was like, I just don't know if I've ever, when I watch things, it's far less a recognition of myself, but it's like being let into all these things that aren't me that I find so exciting. So just even asking the questions like, well, then what is it that because clearly part of the joy of watching something is when it resonates with you because it reminds you of things you've experienced and all that. So I was like, well, what are the things that stand out the most to me? And all the things I kept picking out were these kind of situations where, well, one of my favorite genres ever is the detective genre,
oh, sure.
So, the noir stuff and Philip Marlowe and Sam Spade and, of course, Columbo.
Yeah.
11:30 a.m., February 24th. Entering the town of Twin Peaks. It's 5 miles south of the Canadian border, 12 miles west of the state line. I've never seen so many trees in my life. As W.C. Fields would say, I'd rather be here than Philadelphia. 54 degrees on a slightly overcast day. Weatherman said rain. You get paid that kind of money for being wrong 60% of the time. You'd be working.
Also these kind of hyper-real things that, when I was a kid, the Cloak and Daggers or Time Bandits or stuff like that, or, Never Ending Story, where it's starts off...
Oh, my God. You just listed 2 of my totems in Time Bandits and Never Ending Story.
So it's that normal, you're in real life, and then you find out that there's this whole other thing going on, that, life is as magical and crazy as you, suspected it might have been when you were a kid. And so then it led me to, well, of course, David Lynch, and then the combination. And I'm so sorry. I know I've been through rules. I said the series, but I figured I took a leap of faith that you knew exactly.
It really it's so specific and has become such a it is what he went wide with in that show. He had been making things before. Honestly, I loved Dune 2 especially, but my favorite Dune is David Lynch's Dune. He obviously was working before Twin Peaks, but Twin Peaks was the thing that brought him into the living rooms of people.
Yes.
And it is I think cemented that notion of what we would now describe as the term of Lynchian.
Yes.
And so when you said that, it's okay. Yes.
And then it is the fact that it was, when you said in the living rooms, for me, I grew up with family. Both my parents are actors, and I grew up going to theater, watching movies, and I just specifically remember us all sitting around and watching Twin Peaks, every week, and that it felt so it felt like I was no longer watching what they wanted to watch. It was like mine.
Well, I'll tell you, we're sure glad to have the FBI here. Kind of lucky in a way that Ron had stepped out across the state line. Whole town is really badly shaken up.
Sure, it's a nice, quiet place, something like this. Sheriff, let me stop you in the hallway here for just a second. There's a few things that we got to get straight right off the bat. I've learned about this the hard way. It's best to talk about it up front. When the Bureau gets called in, the Bureau's in charge. Now, you're going to be working for me. Sometimes local law enforcement has a problem with that. I hope you understand.
Well, like I said, we're glad to have you here.
Sheriff, what kind of fantastic trees have you got growing around here? Big, majestic.
Douglas firs.
Douglas firs. Can someone give me a copy of the coroner's report on the dead girl?
The main reason you're one of my absolute favorite screen presences, and I think this is something that connects to this sort of Twin Peaks of it all, is I am, every time you appear on screen, it could be episode 9 of a show you've been in for every episode, but I'm like, what's she gonna do now? Like, no matter what I've seen you, not because like your choices are disconnected from one another as an actor, or they're like not making sense, so there's like these non sequiturs, but you're such a surprising actor kind of every time you appear on screen. There's not any kind of getting comfortable with like a Samantha Sloyan character, and I feel like that to me is absolutely representative of how I felt watching Twin Peaks, or how I feel watching anything David Lynch, of like, what are these people going to do next?
Yes, that is.
And just like, and for you specifically, I'm like kind of afraid. If it's a dramatic thing that's like heavy, I'm like afraid anytime you show up on screen, like, what's she going to do to me specifically as I'm experiencing her character? And that too feels like the experience that I would have watching Twin Peaks. Like, what are these people going to do to me this time? And I wanted to hear about watching this episodic, like week to week when it's coming out, how that informs the performer that you became.
Yeah. You know, that's so interesting. One, I think that's one of the best compliments you could ever give me, honestly, is that, like, I'm afraid because I don't know what you're going to do. One of my favorite things that I remember, I also love when I am lucky enough to have the opportunity and the time to do theater. I love theater. And my first play when I was in, I think, 21 or something like that, there was the parents of another person in the cast came to see it a million times. And then one day they came up to me and they said, "We love you so much. You're our favorite person because you always do exactly the same thing." And I know that they meant that as a compliment, because they meant like... Right.
They loved it. They're like, oh, we can't wait to tell you this.
We trust that you're going to, say your lines in the same way. But there was something about it where I was like, that's not exactly what I want to inspire.
Like, you really snatched an insult from the jaws of a compliment on that one. Wow.
It wasn't like that. I thought they were insulting me, but I definitely took that to mind with myself of like, oh, you can't get so set in what you think something's going to be before you see what it might be. And a big part of the way I prepare for something is I try to know it backwards and forwards so that I'm not thinking about it. And I feel like only after my personality, because I'm a bit of a worrywart and stuff like that if I just know that I'm not going to mess up on the lines, then I'm kind of more free to try things. But with the Lynch thing, it's a big part of it. So also one of the things I love about the particular, I don't know, I guess he's like a genre of himself, but like, that you, because again, my dream, like if I could play my dream part, it would be, a PI or a detective. I understand he's an FBI agent, but the kind of like the stranger comes to town, he's in it. And like you said, he comes into this world that he's so not of.
And it's so interesting with Dale Cooper because he's the stranger that comes to town.
Yeah.
But in any other town but Twin Peaks, he would be the stranger. He'd be the fucking weirdo anywhere else.
And like the fact that he is, and that he's so interested and he's never judging these people, he's always just observing and learning.
Oh, afternoon, guys. Would you like some coffee?
Afternoon, Shelley, yes.
Well, we should be on our way.
Carrie, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Every day, once a day, give yourself a present. Don't plan it, don't wait for it, just let it happen. Could be a new shirt at the men's store, a cat nap in your office chair, or 2 cups of good, hot, black coffee. Like this.
A present. Like Christmas.
Oh, man, that hits the spot. Nothing like a great cup of black coffee.
Once you start splashing just a little bit of like supernatural in there, like you have me. And but then also I think I can't remember if I heard David Lynch talking about this or somebody else talked about it, but I thought it was so accurate that it is also in essence a soap opera.
Yes,
and
very much so.
And as I was thinking about this, because I haven't. The last time I watched, so I've watched it full through several times, but the last time was when season 3 was coming out, and I had watched season 1, season 2, and then was ready for season 3. And I love 3. I know some people aren't into it. I don't care. I loved it. So I was thinking about, I think it might have been the first or second episode where they've locked the boys up who they think might, and they're like howling like wolves in the cells.
Yeah.
When you least expect it.
And for me, just those choices were so not safe and so huge and expansive and almost is soap opera, operatic, like this kind of hugeness to them that I admire so deeply. Like when you see somebody swing for the fences with almost like no sense of embarrassment or just with total abandon, I'm just captivated.
The swinging for the fences things actually gets at something that I wanted to bring up specifically, which is there is something about within all of Lynch, but again within Twin Peaks, there's a kind of alienating specificity and intensity to it, and by being so completely and unselfconsciously itself, it courts. It's the exact opposite of like a studio note that's like, what about the guy in Bakersfield who's going to watch this? And it's like, the guy in Bakersfield might find it and he might hate it
more
and he'll
than
never.
Anybody.
He might hate it and never come back, or he might discover it's exactly his thing. So it's not going to try to please everyone. Therefore, it will be exactly for the people who need to find it.
Yeah.
And that kind of alienating embodiment of character and tone is something that I feel from your performances. Like it as Bev Keane in Midnight Mass, as in Follow the House of Usher, my favorite of the Flanaverse television shows. And in The Pit, like it's not just working in horror genre, it's working in this like ensemble driven, which is something obviously that Mike Flanagan has forged as well, this ensemble driven piece, which is so much of what David Lynch works as well. These ensemble piece of repertory players who stick with him from production to production. And I wanted to hear from you about that kind of like sort of the opposite of the ethos of the likable female character, which we're not so hung up on anymore, but is formative to like, I'm 39, I'm a late millennial. Like I would imagine the stuff that we were consuming when we were coming up was anathema to this notion of being such an alienatingly specific woman that's like what you should go in full bore on. And I wanted to hear from that being a frequent sort of aspect of characters you played and the abandon with which you throw yourself into these like really like alienatingly intense people.
It's interesting. I feel like I talked briefly at the top that just the concept of just the feeling seen by things. I think I always felt, there's a type of watching movies that is kind of gone that I remember, which is, you end up in these weird loops of whatever's on cable television. So you're like,
the things that I have watched a billion
Yes.
times because it was HBO's programming slate that month. Like, wow.
Yeah. And it's, I was like, all these movies that I know inside and out at one point that I wouldn't have even really chosen to watch. But yeah, I think that I'm also, I'm also a bizarrely, like, I love a rom-com, like a great rom-com. But I think there was always a part of me that felt kind of outside of things. So when I would watch these things, I would love watching the person, but I never exactly was able to imagine if it were if it were me,
Totally.
like, doing these things. So there's something about the outside quality of the characters that I get to play now. The not having to worry about, 'cause, the women who, the women, the men, everybody who is great at being, let's say, a rom-com lead, like somebody we're all watching and rooting for and imagining ourselves as, like, that job is so hard.
Yeah.
I think those people are magic that I watch them and I'm like, you are so likable and I could watch you all day and I care about how you make a phone call or, these things that for me, I get a little jammed up with. And there's something about the, like, not even having to. I did a play years ago and it was the first time I played just a straight up unlikable person. And I remember standing in front of the audience and really feeling them not like me. And, like, the first couple of performances, I was really thrown because I was kind of
interesting.
I don't think anybody told me this, but I guess I had assumed that part of being an actor was, like, people liked you or, like, wanted to like your character or rooted for you because they applaud and they're supposed to be like, we loved you and you were great. But there was something about being actively disliked in real time that was unnerving and then really liberating. And so
that's so interesting to, like, feel that transition in, like, an assumption you had made that maybe you didn't even know you'd made.
Yeah.
To be like, this feels icky. And then it's like, but I must go further.
Yeah. and you kind of get free to be like, every choice I make as one of these terrible people comes from something. Like, they come from a purpose or a need or a fear or something. But to not have to worry about people approving of that or agreeing with it. And again, to pull it back to David Lynch, it's like he brazenly just doesn't care if you understand.
That is absolutely something I wanted to get at was the, like, the absolute inhibition with, like, the being divorced from the need to explain anything. Like, to not need your audience to understand what you meant. Like, that's not a requirement for me. Like, maybe you'll pick up on stuff, maybe you won't, but here you go.
And it's hard because not everybody can do it. And I do feel like it is a little pervasive in things now that it does bother me. I feel like there's this weird thing where they're like, we need the audience to see it, then we need you to tell them, then we need somebody else in the script to reaffirm what they've seen, and then we need to show them again. And you're like, people don't need that. And and sometimes I will feel like if something's not explained, I feel unfulfilled. But there's some way about when he does it, like, I feel fully satisfied, even though I don't, I'm not left with, like, if somebody was like, explain to me exactly, the Black Lodge, I'd be like, no. Because I can't.
No.
Yeah.
Me and my wife and her best friend, we went to see, they had never seen Mulholland Drive, and it was playing in a beautiful screening at the Egyptian here in Los Angeles. And they had never seen a Lynch movie before. And I knew that I didn't want them to see one for the first time on a TV at home. Because, like, no, I want you to be in it. And so when we were walking out of it, I was like, so, did you get it? And they just looked at me like I was quizzing them, and I went, I don't either. It's fine. That was not an expectation of an answer. I just wanted to know if you ever got farther than I'd have. Like, but, like, I don't watch it to get it. I watch it to exist in.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and also the beauty of things like that when you aren't. And I think, to be fair, I think everything has this, is as you age, everything changes. Like as your experience changes, what you pick up on or what you see changes. And it's particularly funny now being older and watching a lot of the because watching the coming of age movies with the actors that were my age somehow still is okay, because in my head there's still the diagram of where they are and where I am, it still makes sense. But sometimes when I watch younger stuff now, I'm like, oh, it's so hard for me to invest sometimes in the fears of a 14-year-old sometimes, but
No, I can't believe I've crossed that threshold where I watch these movies now and I'm like, that mom made some good points.
I know.
I'm like, oh my God. I don't have kids of my own yet, but I am now at the, I had someone on, we talked about Interstellar and how watching it 10 years ago versus watching it now and crying so much more watching it now because I'm like, Matthew McConaughey did this for his kids. Then it was a sci-fi spectacle to me that I didn't really emotional connect with. And I was like, oh, this looks amazing, but I'm not really in it. And now it was like, this is devastating. But the movie is the same movie.
It's the same
but
movie.
I'm not the same me.
And also your eyes being open, all these wonderful character actors who played the parents and things, where you're like, oh my God, I totally didn't see that person was working their face off there. They were just the mom. So yeah.
And the ensemble aspect was something that I wanted to talk to you about, because you mentioned loving the chance when you get to do theater, and it seems like that was your entry point into acting from what I have read and listened to. And that is, the core of that is being with a group of people day in and day out, a bond with this family of performers. Yeah. And then you've done a lot of television that involves a one episode appearance. And then now you've settled into, this Mike Flanagan universe of programming, particularly where it is it is this building repertory troupe of people who keep coming back time after time and expanding to more and more people with sort of each project that he does. And again, that being a hallmark of David Lynch's work too, his troupe of players that come with him. Yeah. And I wanted to hear what it does in terms of like you said, knowing all those lines, mastering the lines so that you can play with something within it. Yeah. So you don't have to worry about the memorization part. And I wanted to hear about what sort of baseline kind of shared communication and shared language does with a returning ensemble of people in terms of all right, I've memorized these dynamics to a degree. So I'm not figuring out these dynamics as I'm doing my performance too, and how that differs from showing up where you are hired for a day or a couple of days to do something on a show.
Yeah, honestly, it makes a huge, huge difference. Just there's always a little level of panic, when you're coming in for an episode.
That seems so hard.
Well, not just the actual acting, but down to I'm where do I park? Who is my point person? Who am I supposed to talk to? It's just kind of wandering around the lot for a second. Just are you my mother? Are you, can you show me where I'm supposed to be? And then I'm picking up on that. Just incidentally, the last, the pit was, I'd say I was there for quite a long time just because of the way that things shot, because you're all on set the whole time, whether you're kind of visible or not, mainly. So
I had read that they kept everybody through the whole production.
Very much so. So myself and Brandon Keener, who played my husband, were there, for on and off for about 3 months. And that set kind of, because of the way Noah runs things, and again, it's, whatever team. And it just felt very welcoming and very where everything was. And it was shocking to me how quickly I felt like that was part of a repertory, which is, I think, part of a thing that was written to the team who created that show. But with this, over the years, because the first thing I worked with Mike on was Hush. And I was terrified because, I think I just really wanted to do a good job. And nobody was ever seeing me for this kind of roles that he was seeing me for. The world would have not, most likely, perhaps, offered me Beverly Keane to try. or had been like, I think you might be able to do this. And then also trusting him and also watching, because, he's an editor as well, very much so. And so he's like editing in his head while he's watching you, basically. And so learning and working with him and understanding that even when there were times where I was like, I really didn't get that. I didn't ever find it. I didn't ever nail it. But then he takes care of everybody. And so when you see a scene put together and you understand that he's not ever going to leave you hanging out to dry, it's
That's gotta be so nice to just feel so safe.
It is. It's a real comfort. And of course, it's not about, it's shockingly not about me. He wants his piece, he wants the piece to be really, fabulous. And his love for it is so big that encompasses everybody. But because of that, because of my trust that he won't let me fall on my face, unless I guess I just insist on it so much that there's nothing he can do. But that
I am just dead set on falling on my face.
I will allow no take that's even usable. But but it does help with what I was talking about before about like making larger choices that may not work. And I think that it's hard when you're coming in on a day player thing. It's not that everybody doesn't understand and doesn't want their show to be great and doesn't want you to try things. It's just like logistically, there's only so much time in a day. And like they don't you haven't been in for rehearsals and they don't, I think that one of the hardest things in our job is like people, I think, are scared sometimes to see what might be possible just because they don't have the time to control if something might go wrong.
That's a really great point.
If they're like, let's try that take. And then we do. And like, it doesn't, it's just, wouldn't that be something if we could all just like really see what we could do without restriction?
It's time for a break, but we will be back with Samantha Sloyan in a moment. And then at the end, I will have one quick thing about actually Samantha Sloyan. We don't really double dip in the one quick thing department, but I'm just so excited about this news drop that happened related to her this week. I gotta get into it. So stick around at the end for some exciting casting news.
After 400 episodes, the Maximum Film universe is kicking off a brand new phase.
We have got a brand new host, hilarious writer and comedian Kevin Avery.
Hey, that's me.
Kevin's teaming up with me, film critic Alonso Duralde.
And me, producer and film festival programmer Drea Clark.
Together, we're taking on summer blockbuster season by talking about some of the biggest movies in theaters.
That makes this the perfect time to join the Maximum Film Gang.
Reserve your Maximum Film ticket.
Pre-order your Maximum Film custom popcorn bucket.
We're trying to say it's a great time to start listening to the podcast.
So jump back into the continuing adventures of Maximum Film every week on MaximumFun.org.
Hey, do you have a favorite episode of Star Trek?
If you do, you should also have a favorite Star Trek podcast.
Greatest Trek is about all the new streaming Star Trek shows, and it's a great companion to The Greatest Generation, our hit show about back catalog Star Trek that you grew up with.
It's a comedy podcast by two folks who used to be video producers, so it's a serious mix of comedy and insight that fits right into the Maximum Fun network of shows.
And Greatest Trek is one of the most popular Star Trek podcasts in the world.
So if you're following Lower Decks, Prodigy, or Strange New Worlds, come hang out with us every Friday as we roast and review our favorite Star Trek shows.
It's on MaximumFun.org, YouTube, or your podcatching app.
I'm back talking with Samantha Sloyan, whose new film is The Life of Chuck. It is based on a short story by Stephen King, and as I mentioned up top, it was written and directed by Mike Flanagan, who has been a frequent collaborator of Samantha's for years now. Her character in that film is a PE teacher named Miss Rohrbacher, and that's where we're going to pick back up in the conversation. Well, I do want to get a bit into Life of Chuck,
Yeah.
and because it is a movie with sort of like multiple ensembles within an overarching piece connected
Yes.
by its narrative through lines.
Mhm.
And in your act, I want to hear about forming the like body language and presentation of the most powerfully lesbian coded phys ed teacher in like a high school, middle school setting. Her fashions,
Yes.
what you wear to the dance, those slacks. I want to hear about this. Like she's stern, but she's a lovely woman. And I feel like we generally air more stern heavy in stuff we tend to see you, Mike Flanagan, with the exception of Midnight Club, which you are like a lovely, gentle woman.
Sure, I am. Yeah.
yeah, sure. From what we see.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell me about playing your role in Life of Chuck, and tell me about this. Like, I've had a chance to talk to Mike about it, and what a sort of beautiful opus of his career. It's almost like a bookend, but something that's coming in the middle.
Yeah.
Of what will generally I consider to be a much longer career than it already has been already.
Yeah.
But like the symmetry of like cast coming back from his earliest films into this one, and the ties narratively into his life in the real world outside of screen and putting it on screen, and like it seems like kind of just like a snow globe of an experience, and I wanted to hear about how it was for you.
A snow globe of an experience. I like that. Well, I think, and it's hard because you're not interviewing Mike, and I don't want to speak for Mike, but my experience of him and the way that his brain works over the years I've known him is that he kind of has, that idea of like all things in time are happening at the same time.
Yeah.
Like that he has all these stories in his brain swimming around somewhere. Just even things like when we did Hush, the book that Maddie has written is Midnight Mass. And that story existed in him then. Like he knew he was going to do this story. And I think, and he talks about like as soon as he read this short story that he was like, I'm going to make this.
Yeah, it seemed like it was basically like a thunderclap. Like it was immediate.
Yeah. And so I think this, and also like Stephen King, who I am but a novice when it comes to Stephen King fans, but I have read many of his books, and just the all these pieces connect to each other, that these people across books belong to each other, and it's a much greater world that's all connected. I feel like that's kind of the effect of, as Mike goes along, that his movies take on, because it's not just the one movie he's making. It has these pieces. If just a physical person or an idea or just like a line or a prop or something, like you'll see a lot of times like the Oculus mirrors and a ton of things that you wouldn't expect it to be there. Like he brings, you said snow globe, but like a snowball of like, he's gathered everything and he brings it with him, and that all exists everywhere. And I think, we were making this movie also, it was during the strike, but since it was fully...
you guys had like an exemption as like an independent production.
because it was a fully independent production. And so there was, just speaking for myself as an actor, there was just this kind of, we just felt so lucky to, and to be leaning on and surrounded by our people at a time where we were all really don't really know what things are going to be like in the future, and just to have the opportunity to do that, and for a piece that I think is so beautifully optimistic and not in a way that allows for the understanding of all the things, all the reasons why we shouldn't be optimistic. So it's not like ignoring things that are existing. Terrible, tragic things happen to our title character, throughout his life. And, but that doesn't mean that the story isn't a beautiful one, So I just thought it was wonderful. As far as my Miss Rohrbacher, when I had read the short story, and the short story is absolutely wonderful, and I highly recommend anybody read it. It's very quick, if just because I think it would be really fun if you have read it to then watch the movie. I think would be kind of thrilling, because you read it and you're like, how exactly is this going to happen? And then you find out. But so I read that, and then Mike had built her out a little bit more. And it was just so, sometimes you read things, this happened with me with Bev too, like you read things and you just kind of know how they need to sound and who they are. And then I think my work is really just trying to bring it to that spot and figure out, because there is always a little, for myself, not everybody has this, but there's always like, I read it in my head, I'm like, this is genius. And then you do a reading out loud and you're like, well, I accomplished nothing. Like I did not bring that anywhere near what I have in my head, and I have a lot of work to do. And
I've accomplished nothing.
Yeah, this is not worked. And that's also when I think the beautiful collaboration of our business that I'm just constantly stunned I have been able to do as a job. It's just really just every day you're like, holy shit, okay. But I'm one of these people who I do have ideas, but I don't exactly know what I want them to look like. So Terry Anderson, who is the costumer who had worked on, he was with me on Mask, he was with me on Usher, and he did Chuck. And so there's things that he brought up, and that, like the costuming for Miss Rohrbacher, he was like, what do you think about this? And I was like, yeah. And then I think one thing, and then he brings in what he's built, and you're like, oh, and then you put that on, and that helps dictate so much, so it's the kind of combination. In the hair, I fell in love with the hairstyle so much so that I, have tried to do it on my own a few times too. Diminishing returns for sure. But this was the first character where I really I don't usually, unless I'm covered in blood or something, I don't usually take pictures of myself in the trailer. But this one, I was like, this is nice. Note to self, buy something like this. But
that's exciting.
Yeah. So again, just a testament to when you have, because that fleshes everything out, right? Because it's Stephen King thinks of her, and then Mike Flanagan adds to her, and then I read, and then I'm like, it has to be this. And then other people who I haven't talked to about were like, well, what about this? Because they haven't seen me do it. It's just this kind of it's like, what does this person evoke? Which is also one of the crazy things about when, and that I think makes things so difficult adapting books. Because we all have our characters, right?
Yeah.
And then somebody's like, this is how Paul Atreides looks. And you're like, is it? But I mean, speaking of also that Dune, for me, that's the Baron is always God. That. Just because it was horrifying.
The Duke will die before these eyes, and he'll know that it is I, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who encompasses his doom.
Okay, I guess my final question, I sadly have to ask a final question.
But I would chat with you forever.
I know, I'm really so enjoying this. You talking about putting on the costume of Miss Rohrbacher in Life of Chuck, and realized as you were saying that I think I kind of, within your like the very diverse roles you've played within like Mike Flanagan films, and then like thinking of The Pit as well. I think you, more than most of the players in the repertory, I do kind of align with so much of like the aesthetic of them in addition to the performance of them. Like there's such a look about Bev that feels specifically kind of set apart from the rest of people on the island of Midnight
Yeah, she's
Mass.
out of time away, in a way.
Yes, she's the person that time forgot in this place, like very intentionally for her. It seems like she's sort of frozen in amber on this island. And then in House of Usher, everybody's kind of very stylistic and blown out. Obviously, Kate Siegel looks flawless in the platinum wig,
and she's different than I. She has a lot of her look is, you know, that's part of her creative. She sees it in a way that I don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then obviously Miss Rohrbacher, and then in The Pit, like the physical presentation and the embodiment of the grief that's going through in how you are styled and look, it crystallized more for me than kind of almost any of the other people in the show. And I'm realizing that like I feel like one of the things that I'm so moved by in your performances is that you kind of like sharpen and define a character to almost to the point of like an archetype. Like this is a silo of a person who's so sharply drawn that they are this way and they are one thing. And then what she's going to do next comes from the layer and detail that you peel back consistently over the arc of what you do, where it's like, how did they obliterate this archetype, this like fixed almost caricature so completely as to make them so fully fleshed out? And I feel like that too is something that I really recognize in David Lynch's work, and particularly in Twin Peaks, where everybody, like, you think of Audrey in the sweater, you think of Dale Cooper in the suit, you like, obviously, like, Laura Palmer is this kind of fixed image in the Red Room. You think of, you know, Wild, was it Bob, in like the maniacal, the hair, and the like.
I still think of Bob. Yeah.
Oh God, Bob is an all-time terror.
Be quiet! You go.
There are these characters that like they almost are cartoonishly drawn,
yes,
but then become so full over the course of it. And I wanted to hear from you about that kind of like sharpening and like finely forming, and then be like, and then I'm going to rip all the packaging away, to like expose the raw nerves.
It was so funny because when you said that, you know, you just think of also Agent Cooper's like season 3 arc where he's like literally other people. You know, his person has been so pulled apart. First of all, I love that. And that's something I think I will keep in mind when I'm working on stuff. I think part of, you know, because the thing also about stories being told, like books being written or plays or movies or stuff, is where I guess you could take it out to paintings, anything. But like the reason why you're telling this slice of time is because something changes, right? That I think that there's something to be said for, we all think we're all, I mean, I'll speak for myself, so desperately trying to figure out what it is I think and what it is I want and who I want to be as a human being, and how do I keep in line with that, and am I making the right decisions, and like that does have a rigidness at one point, because we kind of become, I don't know, we kind of start thinking we are things that maybe we truly aren't, just because habit or reputation or the way that we fall in line with somebody else in the world and you know, are surrounded by them. But one of the things I love, and I was talking about this recently, about the horror genre in particular, is nobody knows, there's kind of this beauty of like, everybody can talk about who they're going to be in a zombie apocalypse, but nobody knows who they're going to be. And so when we're watching people being put in like situations that are otherworldly, that have not happened to people, it cracks people open to suddenly be like, I don't know what I'm going to do, or what mistakes I might make, or like how is my moral compass going to be the same? Am I going to do things against who I always thought I was? And honestly, being older, there's a lot. Look, I'm not like, I've not murdered anybody.
You're like, and if you've heard otherwise, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're
talking about. And give me their names and numbers. I can murder them. But like the thing of like, I have certainly had moments in my life where I was like, wow, I really never thought I would like be that shitty to somebody, or, you know, and like you kind of disappoint yourself. And sometimes you surprise yourself. You're like, wow, I really didn't think I would stand up for myself in that way. Or, you know, I don't know what I'm saying. I guess I just mean like, so there's something about the archetype, which I think is who the character we've met. And I like that you feel that you're seeing somebody who you understand solidly, because there's not a lot of time. So there is something great to like, okay, I get this. So that's really interesting. I like that. And so I just have a rambling answer, but I'm definitely going to use that thought a lot more of that. Like, yeah, if somebody used to look at a picture, what do they get? And am I supplying them with enough information that they can come up with something in line with what I'm intending?
I think that has already worked many times successfully on me in seeing your work. And I simply cannot ask another question and put it on producer Marissa to just cut this into pieces. So I just have to say thank you so much,
Thank
Samantha.
you. This was a real joy.
You're telling me. Thank you so much to Samantha Sloyan. God, truly, what an honor. The Life of Chuck comes out today in cinemas. Unless you're familiar with the short story, which I was not, I don't know that the trailer is really going to indicate to you what this movie is like. This is not a Haunting of Hill House. This is not an Oculus from Mike Flanagan. This is more Stand By Me, Stephen King, than it is It, Stephen King. So going with that sort of heart, and I feel like thinking of it a bit more through that lens than just outright thrills and chills. Even if the first act did leave me in its final moments like so pulse-poundingly nervous, like I had to like bounce back kind of through most of the second act because it was just got so stressful and kind of scary, but you'll have to watch to find out. So you should go do that. And now that one quick thing before I go, where I said it would be about, once again, Samantha Sloyan. I don't normally do this, but only after we recorded this episode and before its drop, nestled in between then, did we learn that in Mike Flanagan's forthcoming Carrie television series, big round of casting announcement was just made. And, you know, he has his repertory theater that he brings with him from project to project. And guess who is playing Mrs. White? One of the most resonantly chilling characters, let alone moms, in the history of horror screen material. Samantha effing Sloyan, you guys. This is, Bev Keane in Midnight Mass was so scary, but this is like, Bev Keane is like Margaret White with training wheels on. So I am incredible. This feels like, not that her career would be done after this, but this feels like one of those final form kind of role. Like the way this is actor meeting role in the exact perfect, standing in the middle of the exact perfect intersection of character and performer. Wow. I of course was going to watch anyway. I'm a big Mike Flanagan fan, and Carrie is great. But knowing, like, my primary level of excitement now is channeled toward seeing the rendition of Margaret White that Samantha Sloyan, in her terrifying zeal that she can channel, what she is going to imbue into this character. Yeah, that's the top of the Carrie agenda for me now. Great choice, Mike Flanagan. And that is our show. This guest becoming Mrs. White in the new Carrie adaptation television series. And you can keep up with us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow the show wherever you are listening currently to get every new episode in your feed as it drops. Follow us to find out more on Instagram at Feeling Seen Pod. We are also on Blue Sky, where you can search Feeling Seen. You can find me there as well. JORCRU, same as my handle on Twitter. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows,
supported
directly
by you.